Good morning. Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much. No better way to start a Halloween service than with scary organ music. Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Emily Bruce. I'm the minister of this congregation. Today, I am a sparkly unicorn, flying unicorn as well. And thank you all of you who came with costumes or put on costumes when you entered. So here we are. We're going to have a few quick announcements before we start. First of all, what a week, what a storm. How's everybody doing? Is there still anyone who doesn't have power? God, I hope everyone should have power by now. Thank God. Okay, good. I hope you all survived. I know it was quite a challenging week for all of us, but I'm happy to see you here and happy that we all seem to be safe and well. Next Sunday, we're going to be doing Next Sunday, we're going to be doing our All Souls service. Since today is Halloween, we decided to do that service next Sunday. So we will be creating an altar in worship, and you are all invited to bring photos and other small mementos of loved ones to place on the altar. We'll also have a bowl of rocks for you to select a rock or rocks to place on the altar. So please bring pictures if you have them, if you want to share them during worship next week. And I'm also excited to announce that Karen Rutherford's brass quintet, the North River Brass Quintet, will be providing music for worship next Sunday. So it's going to be a good service. Our 21-day Racial Justice Indigenous Challenge started last Sunday. You can still join if you want. There's a Zoom meeting tonight. Jane is not here, but Cara is, and Amanda is. There you are, thank you. So see one of them if you need the information, if you want to join. It's been really great so far. For me personally, I've really enjoyed the daily readings and listenings, and I encourage everyone to join even now, a weekend. It's been very, very enlightening. What else? Silver Bells is happening November 13th and 14th, yay. Where is Christina? There she is. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but Christina is our fearless leader in organizing all this. If you want to help, if you want to make things, if you want to help her coordinate things, please reach out to her. Is there another meeting coming up this week or no? Okay. Great, good, thank you. Okay, good. So we hope you'll join if you want to help, and also come on November 13th in Beale House. It'll be a lot of fun. And as with all things, read the newsletter every week. Everything I just said is in the newsletter and a lot of more information, but I didn't want to take up too much of our time. So read the newsletter, it comes out on Thursdays. And now I invite you all to take a deep breath in and out. We've kind of had an exciting start to service, but this is a worship service. So I invite you to get comfortable, feel your back against the pew behind you. Let your hands rest somewhere comfortably. If you're holding on to something or clenching something, maybe let go of your fingers, let go of your jaw and your shoulders. And take another deep breath in and out. And let yourself rest and receive the offering of this service and be at peace for the next hour. We are going to start our worship by lighting our chalice. And we light our chalice to these words by Deborah Burrell. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consume our regrets for the past, our fears about the future, and our worries for today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace. Our opening hymn is going to be a quartet this morning. It's I Know This Rose Will Open, which is hymn number 396. You're welcome to follow along. And it will be sung by Ruthie, Rachel, Cara, and Chris.
Arg. Ahoy, mateys, happy Halloween. My name is Laura Sanda, and I serve this congregation as your captain of religious enrichment. In just a moment, I will be calling our young scallywags up for what you all will be very excited to see, our Boomwhacker choir. But first, I just want to say, especially after the frightful week we've had, how excited I am that our children and youth are going to be able to be here together to perform music in the meeting house. This is something new for all of us. And as I have been saying since day one, new things are a little hairy and scary, but I think you're in for more of a treat than a trick. So without further ado, unless you all want to walk the plank, help me welcome up the official First Parish Kingston Boomwhacker Choir.
Thank you, Boomwhackers. They will be back later in the service. Very happy about that. And I also neglected, and I apologize deeply for this, to mention at the top of the service that our own Laura Sanda is responsible for all of these amazing Halloween decorations of our sanctuary. So she told me she was just going to put up a few decorations. Talk about setting the stage. No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Thank you, Laura. So we're going to switch gears a little bit because now is the time of our service where we open our minds and our hearts and hold the joys and sorrows of this congregation. So because of the Boomwhacker setup, we are once again going to
They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together ooky, the Addams Family. Their house is a museum. When people come to see them, they really are a scream, the Addams Family. So get a witch's shawl on, a broomstick you can crawl on. We're going to take a call on the Addams Family.
Thank you, boom whackers. Thank you, thank you. Our reading this morning is pulled from an episode of the very popular decades-long British television series, Doctor Who. Do we have any Doctor Who fans? Okay, there's a couple of you, yep. This is from an episode entitled Listen that originally aired in September 2014 and was written by Stephen Moffat. Listen, I know you're afraid. Being afraid is all right. Because did nobody ever tell you? Fear is a superpower. Fear can make you faster and cleverer and stronger. And you may be very, very afraid. And that's okay, because if you're wise, and very strong, fear doesn't have to make you cruel or cowardly. Fear can make you kind. It doesn't matter if there's nothing under the bed or in the dark, so long as you know it's okay to be afraid of it. So listen. If you listen to nothing else, listen to this. You're always going to be afraid, even if you learn how to hide it. Fear is like a companion, a constant companion. It's always going to be there, but that's okay, because fear can bring us together. Fear can bring you home. Fear makes companions of us all. I will admit I'm not a Doctor Who fan yet. I sense it's coming after reading that. I'm looking at you, Ed, because you were the first one to raise your hand when I said, is there a Doctor Who fan in the house? Oh, okay, well, maybe this is my chance, yeah. But any series that can really talk about fear in such an open and honest and truthful way has got my vote, so yeah. So I'll let you know if I start watching. So good morning again, and happy Halloween again to all of you. Thank you for being here. What a week. I'll say it one more time. I'm really grateful for all of you for being here. And Rich, I can't stop looking at you in that mask and being like a little, but it's good. It's good. I appreciate all the costumes. So if it's not already clear, today's service is about everyone's favorite topic, fear. We're all afraid of a lot of different things, and that's a big part of being human. Being human in today's world gives us ample opportunities to be afraid of stuff, right? There's no shortage. And when I say fear, I'm not just talking about being scared of spiders or heights or things like that, although I am talking about that. I'm talking about anxiety. Anxiety is fear. Jealousy is fear. Greed is fear. Contempt and anger are rooted in fear. Fear of the other, fear of being hurt, fear of being wrong or looking foolish. So we're talking about more than just fear of the dark, fear of bridges, fear of death, the greatest fear of them all. In Buddhism, fear is considered to be the root of all suffering, where all of our distress and unhappiness comes from. And the Buddha taught that the reason we fear is because we resist the impermanence of our existence, that we don't accept the moment for what it is. We don't accept ourselves. We don't accept the reality of our situation, of our temporary existence on the earth. The struggle is where the pain comes from, not from the reality, but from our resistance in accepting it. So many of us, myself included, can spend a lot of time just stewing in our fear, letting it hold us captive while we fret and we worry and imagine all of the worst possible scenarios that can happen. And in those moments, for myself, fear makes me feel really, really small. But on the flip side, our reading that we had this morning held up the idea that fear can make us big. Indeed, it is a superpower. It can make us brave. It can make us kind. It can make us realize our connections to each other. Because the thing about our fears is that we all have them. We all share them. None of us are actually alone in our fear. One of the greatest ironies, I think, about humanity is that the things we keep to ourselves, namely our fear and our shame and our guilt, are often the greatest source of connections between us. Because we all have fear and shame and guilt. And they're often a lot of the same fears and shame and guilt. We carry them with us every single day. So instead, we often deal with our fear by burying it, pushing it aside and carrying on with our stiff upper lips, as I know us New Englanders like to have our stiff upper lips as much as we can. In some ways, that makes sense because we humans are really, really good at going to the most extreme lengths to avoid feeling our own pain. And I'm that way too. We all are. Sometimes we face our fears by doing the thing that makes us afraid as quickly as possible, just so we can get it over with. And sometimes I can muster courage for that, depending on the scary thing in question. Going to the dentist, sure. Just get it over as quickly as possible. Taking an elevator up to the top of a really, really tall building, okay. Going into a dark, cobwebby basement, not on your life. No way, no thank you, not for me. Somebody else can face that fear. And other times, some of us, and this definitely does not include me, I'm the biggest scaredy cat alive. Some of us seek out fear as a means of coping. Those of you who like horror films and haunted houses, raise your hands if you're in the house, if you're one of those people. Yeah, good luck, not me. There's actually, and this is true because I looked this up when I was researching for this sermon, there's a fair amount of research out there that claims that those of you who embrace horror movies and haunted houses and willingly being frightened may have far better coping strategies for dealing with all the fearful things of daily life. So pat yourself on the back for that one. I don't know how you do it. It's not for me. But no matter how you handle it, fear is always there, right? It never goes away. And like our reading said, it's a constant companion. What matters is how you handle it, how you accept it and move through it. Now, history is full of examples of people not handling their fear well, especially when it comes to times of pandemic and plague. And since it's Halloween and it's time for some spooky stories, I'm going to share a few examples. The first, which most of you have heard of, I'm sure, the Black Plague, hit Europe in 1347, and this is amazing. It killed 20 million people in just 4 years. That kind of devastation, unbelievable, led to panic and widespread attempts at scapegoating those who were perceived to be responsible. Among the Jews and gypsies who were often targeted, the plague also gave rise to many, many witch stories, scary, scary stories about witches. And not surprising, women were the ones accused of being witches and practicing black magic. They were blamed for intentionally carrying and spreading the disease in their communities. Now, religious fervor also saw a rise in this time of pandemic because many people believed that the plague was a punishment from God. So women were further targeted for being women because Since the original sin of eating the apple was Eve's fault in their mind, the plague was just another example of women's general evil. So there's that. Much closer to home, the Salem witch trials, which I know we've all heard of, occurred in 1692 and 1693, and often described as one of the most notorious cases of mass hysteria. More than 200 people during that year time were accused of witchcraft. So there were several fearful things going on at the time. First, there was a smallpox epidemic sweeping through the area. There was also a severe economic downturn following the 1689 war between the British and the French on American soil. So many small communities like Salem were suffering. And then add to that the ongoing fears of attack from local Native American tribes and other factors like political division and infighting and all of that sort of thing. Of the 200 people accused of witchcraft, 30 were found guilty. 19 of those 30 were executed, 14 women and 5 men. Now, it's not all about witches in these stories. There were also vampires. Now, we've all heard about the Salem witch trials, especially living in this part of the country. But in my research, I found a different example of mass hysteria during a time of plague that I'd never heard of before. The New England vampire panic. Has anyone heard of that? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Ed? Ruthie? That's it? Okay, that I feel better because I was like, how have I never heard of this before? So the New England vampire panic was the reaction to a severe tuberculosis outbreak, largely in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, though it spanned from Maine all the way to Minnesota. So tuberculosis was called consumption at that time, and it was highly communicable, and it laid to waste many, many communities, especially small, tight-knit farming communities that were out in rural areas. The illness was slow and painful, and it often took a couple years to run its course. Now, the vampire panic arose because of the way the disease spread. People believed, this is what they believed, that the dead continued to consume the lives of their surviving loved ones from the grave. Think about that for a second. How else to explain family members continuing to get sick after they died? So obviously there was no modern medicine at the time, and to explain the nature of communicable diseases. And also, like I said, these panics tended to happen in rural areas where there wasn't standard medical care and education like you found in bigger communities and cities. So this belief that the dead continued to try to consume the living led to a practice of digging up graves, and let's just say altering the contents of the coffin in the belief that it would keep them from continuing to rise from the dead. I'll spare you all the details. You can Google it if you want to, especially because we have kids here. But here's the thing. This is the thing that got me more than anything else about this vampire panic, is that it went on for over 150 years. The Salem happened in a year and a half. The Salem witch trials, that whole thing was done in a year and a half, and then it was over. The first documented vampire panic exhumation was in 1793 in Manchester, Vermont. The last one recorded was in 1949, right? If you're willing, raise your hand if you were alive in 1949. So it was still going on when you were alive. How is it that the Salem witch trials get so much attention and so few people talk about the New England vampire panic? I'm amazed. So why this mass hysteria during times of plague? How to explain these extraordinary reactions? Well, I found in my research online a man named Michael Bell. He's a Rhode Island folklore historian, and he's a leading figure in the vampire panic field. He had this to say about the mindset of people during that time. He says, quote, "I start with the assumption that people of past generations were just as intelligent as we are." Bell says, "I look for the logic. Why would they do this? Once you label something just as superstition, you lock off all inquiry into something that could have been reasonable." Reasonable is not always rational. People find themselves in dire situations where there's no recourse through regular channels, he goes on to explain. So the folk system, meaning the stories that they tell themselves, the folk system offers an alternative, a choice. Sometimes superstitions, he says, represent the only hope. Reasonable is not always rational. How we make meaning of what is happening to us is the important thing, not necessarily whether or not that meaning makes rational sense. So therefore, the stories we tell ourselves about our fears, they matter. They matter a lot. The stories we believe about being afraid, they matter. They matter a lot because fear can make you big or it can make you small. It's the story you tell yourself about the fear that matters. So for some New Englanders in the 1800s, they chose to believe the superstition. It made reasonable, if not rational, sense to them because it gave them hope. If what they believed was true and they responded by digging up the grave, it gave them hope for survival. Not rational, but somehow reasonable, no? So on this Halloween, I encourage you to make a little more space for your fear. Don't dismiss your fears as irrational or overly emotional. Let yourself sit with them, name them, accept them for what they are, the constant companions that you can't rationalize away. Whether it's related to something that has already happened to you, something that's happening to you right now, or something you fear happening in the future, my hope is that by sitting with this fear, you can start to separate the fear itself from the story that you're telling yourself about it. Now, I don't mean to minimize the actual fearful thing itself. There are many, many justified things to be afraid of in this life, things that are happening or will happen to all of us, things you can't control and can't wish away. But what we can manage is the stories that we tell ourselves about these fearful things. What do you believe will happen to you? How is this story you're telling crowding out other potential ways of seeing this fearful thing? What can this fearful thing, whatever it is, teach you about what's important to you? What's important for your life? What might you be able to release if you allow yourself to face this fearful thing? Whatever comes up in those thoughts, I encourage you to share them with a close and trusted loved one, because naming our fears aloud is the most powerful way to lessen their control over us. The world may be a frightening place, indeed it is, but we are not alone in our fears. Remember that. As our reading said, fear doesn't have to make you cruel or cowardly. Fear can make you kind. Fear can bring you home. Fear can bring us together. May it be so. Amen. Our closing hymn will be sung by the lovely Cara Roth, and it is "Although This Life Is But a Wraith." Probably the only time we would sing this would be on Halloween. It's hymn number 85. Feel free to follow along in the gray hymnal.
Although this life is but a wraith, although we know not what we use, although we grope with little faith, give me the heart to fight and lose. Ever insurgent let me be, make me more daring than devout, from sleek contentment keep me free, and fill me with a buoyant doubt. From
some compromise and things have done. Keep me with stern and stubborn pride, and when at last the fight is won, oh, keep me still unsatisfied.
Friends, may we always remember that we are not alone in our fear, that we are companions with each other through this life and all that we face. As we go forward to greet the world outside these doors, may we choose with our head and our heart and our hands to bless the world around us. Go in peace. Trying to open this door. Ooh. There's a